Readipop, music changing lives.
Welcome to another Readipop music meetup at the Biscuit Factory. Thanks for everyone coming. It's quite nice that it's light outside. It's usually dark and cold, so that's good. So this one, we're going to be talking about touring and having some tips and tricks and stories about touring. So I've got a lovely panel down here. If you want to go down and introduce yourselves, who you are, what you do, sort of your relationship or experience with touring.
Hello, you right? I'm Jack Shepherd, Ginger Geezer. I've been in a tribute band called the Sheeran Experience for 7 or 8 years and not been home a lot. So it's really awkward. I'll get that out of the way now, but that's been my job, so yeah.
My name's Tim Greaves. In a former life, I was a tour manager. I started off with bands locally, and then a band from Oxford called Radiohead became massive, and I spent 10 years touring with them. I was lucky enough to work in their studio when we finished touring, and now I'm working much more locally, local festivals, Readipop, Are You Listening? So I get to stay at home a lot more, which is important.
Hello, I'm Gavin. I'm director of Readipop, which is a thing that I've been doing for 25 years. But alongside that, for a big chunk of time, I've also been playing in a number of bands. So the kind of key band with the sort of touring stuff is a band called the Dole Foundation. So it's a world music, Punjabi, drumming-based band that I helped record and produce some of their tracks, and then ended up becoming the guitarist and the guy that ran the laptop and the stuff on stage. So it's quite a lot of traveling and touring experience with that band, but not a lot of tours. There were go out, do 2 gigs, come back kind of thing. So lots of sporadic traveling work for me.
Hello, I'm Sabrina. I'm a musician and a vocal coach, and I have toured a whole 2 times, 10 years apart, and 2 very different experiences, both with original bands. And that's it.
Cheers. So how did you guys first get the opportunity to tour, or whatever sort of role you are in touring? How did it first come about?
I worked a lot with local bands, so friends of mine in bands. And then there was quite a scene in the Thames Valley, shoegazing and just before Britpop, really. And so I toured with a few of those bands, and then you get to know the people locally. And recommendations, move one on to the next one and to the next one. And someone just said, oh, you've just done a slow dive tour. Come and meet this band, Radiohead, I'm doing. Come and drive the van. So that's how that started.
How did you get your foot in the door with touring? Did you just go up and say, oh, I'll help out, or?
Yeah, I took a friend's band at school. They did some shows, so I drove the van. And then it's, come and drive the van for my band. Literally like that,
And then steamrolled, yeah.
Yeah.
I literally just played every pub and club I could, and then it led to like another show, and then someone goes, do you want to go to Poland? I'm like, yeah, Poland. And just say yes to everything, really.
Did you start as Ed, or did you have your own sort of stuff first?
So I used to write my own music, and then Ed Sheeran came out, and people used to take the piss out of me, so I stopped, and then got a normal job, and went to do the Ed Sheeran thing as like I can make a few quid, and it's just not stopped. So we're going to Kenya in 2 months. Like that's just fucking that's just crazy. Sorry, yeah.
I got family in Kenya if you need a hookup. just saying. They can provide shade, it'll be fine. So I kind of fell into the touring thing because I never thought I would tour with a band, with an originals band, but was lucky enough to be able to do so just because of the significance of the person that we were touring with. And therefore we got some really good gigs, and we did a whole UK festival tour, which I was quite clearly really unprepared for, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and only got myself ready physically. So did the gig, sang, but everything else around it was like You know, it was quite scary actually. But after the first time we'd booked our own tour, so that was different, where we, as a young originals band, we just found people who wanted to promote originals music, and that's how we fell into touring the first time.
Yeah, I suppose it's sort of two parallel things. So there was the music that I was creating for myself and my own bands, and then trying to organise gigs around the country, and that just being a load of work and a load of just organisation and really expensive and really difficult. And I really wish somebody else would do it for me, and there never was anyone else to do it for me. And the bands never got to the... There was two sides of that. One, it was never kind of technically and economically viable to just go, hey, let's just get a van and go around playing, because it was all super electronic and complicated. And then the other band that I'd produced and worked with, that was them just going, oh, we've got a gig and we need somebody, can you do it? And I just happened to be available. So I went along for a laugh, really, for the first one. And also, it's kind of culturally a sort of odd one in that, it was nearly all Indians, Punjabis in the band. So I was kind of the token white guy. Everybody assumed I was the tour manager, even though I wasn't. And so they would ask me questions as if I was the tour manager, and I became the de facto, the bloke that got asked the questions, or went, no, go and speak to them. But it was a kind of fall into it thing, nothing planned at all. And then it's one of those, the phrase was, once you're on the bus, you're on the bus. So you just got the next gig and the next gig and the next gig until you don't show up for one, or you can't do one gig. And then somebody else is on the bus, and then nobody sees you for 3 years until that guy's ill or something, and then you're back on the bus again. So
this is sort of like a curveball, might get your brain thinking. But do you guys think that tours are still necessary? And have any of you noticed it change with the industry, how the industry has evolved? Because nowadays you could just post something on TikTok and you could earn your living through that. But do you think that tours are the main point?
Well, in the 90s, when I was touring, the tours were to support the release of a record. So the record company would actually fund a tour. The tour would make a loss, but the record company were happy to use it as promotion. And touring was the way of getting your name out there, pre-social media. So they'd send bands out relentlessly, tour, album, tour. And it's more recently it's switched round, and now touring is where the bands make their money more than from record sales.
You probably noticed that with the older rock stars, that Ozzy Osbourne is basically bedbound, but he's still trying to make himself tour. So that's probably, it's all cash, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think touring's pretty essential for the listener, because you need to be able to feel the essence of live music. And I think when you have toured, you don't realize how important that is to the listener as it is to your band or your solo act. So I work with young people who are just starting out in the industry, and they jump on as opening acts. And for them, being able to tour as an opening act is just as liberating as touring as a main act, because you get to see the lifestyle. So I think in terms of understanding the culture of being a musician, touring is really important.
It's a completely different world, and from being in the studio, the touring side of it is just completely different.
Oh, yeah, completely.
And Jack, you're do you think you would have a living if you weren't able to tour?
Yeah, man. That'd be like an asterisk.
No, but as an Ed Sheeran tribute act, do you think you'd be able to do that without touring?
No, not at all. I'm a fan of, like I said earlier, say yes to everything, go everywhere and just play every gig and get in. Because you could be really good on video or Facebook Live or Instagram or whatever it is, but physically go and play in front of someone, that's where it happens, isn't it? It could be 1 people, 1,000 people, live music. And I think it's changed, certainly for me, I don't know about anyone else, but going to Europe with the Carne stuff, since Brexit, it's a lot harder to go and play there because of the equipment and the rules. But hopefully that's going to change. So, yeah.
I also think that going back to the promotion sort of side of it, being a support band or going to a festival is my way of discovering new music. And I think as a band, I think it is pretty key that they go out on tour, because you're going to find hundreds of people that would never listen to your music unless you stumble across it.
But the difficulty, so for example, Dahl Foundation, the band I used to play with regularly, I was chatting to Johnny, who runs the band, just before Christmas, and he'd been offered a tour. He'd been offered to be the tour support for Cooler Shaker, who were, quite a big band in the, 15, 20 years ago, doing a big tour of the UK, well, maybe 15, 20 dates, big theatres, sell-out crowds. And he was going to get offered 200 quid a show to do it. And he wants to take a 5 to 8 piece band that he's going to pay, even if he's paying people peanuts, he's at least paying people 100 quid to do the gig and then putting them up in a hotel. So it's going to cost him at least £1,000 plus the travel of going all the way around the UK. And the economics of it don't stack up unless he sells a lot of T-shirts or a lot of CDs to anybody who might still buy a CD, or unless he can get funding from somewhere to sponsor it. And that's the thing. It used to be the labels that fund this. And now the kind of income from it can come quite a long time after you've performed. He would get PRS income, for example, for playing these shows that are sold out to a big audience who bought tickets to see Cooler Shaker. But he's not going to see that income as the songwriter of the songs he's performing for maybe a year after he's done the gigs.
Yeah. So do you think it's almost like it's better to put yourself out there and be the headliner, book your own shows, than be a support act and earn peanuts, if it's that's the case?
Well, it's kind of why it was economically viable for Ed Sheeran, because it was just him.
Yeah.
And I think pedal, for so many years to build that up. And if you're a solo artist or an individual, you can afford to do it on your own. But yeah, if you're actually paying musicians or trying to do it as a band, it's really expensive.
Sort of ties in with that. Have you guys got any tips on getting a tour at all? Is there any way that you guys would think that, say I'm a young band and I'm wanting to go on tour, how would you guys go about it?
Really, for a tour, you need an agent. So any signed band would probably all have agents, and they were the ones who know the promoters all over the country, can piece a tour together. Very difficult to arrange on your own, I think, without that. I don't know, how do you book your gigs?
So the same thing, like an agent.
Yeah.
Just say, here's 10 shows, here's 10 hotel rooms, that's kind of it.
Yes. Is there a workaround if you didn't have an agent? Do you guys see any workaround that, or
get to know another band? Maybe somehow try and get a support tour. Financially, of course, what Gavin was just saying. But if you could impress someone with your music, maybe, and they'll take you on. They can often look after you, so they might provide you with a sound engineer and a monitor engineer and make it work. But yeah, you're not going to make money off it, but it'd be good for your career. It's good learning experience to how to play to an audience or win an audience over that don't know you. That's a really good skill to pick up.
One of the things we did when 10 years ago, when we were an originals band, we made friends with people who ran a stage. So they were called the Lizard Tent, and they had loads of different world music on there. And because our band was kind of funk hip hop, it somehow merged in. So because we made friends with the people who ran the tent, and they went to different festivals and they liked us, we just went to every festival and played their tent at every festival, which I guess is another way that you could get you could get kind of recognized. So and then as soon as you follow the same tent, you meet different people and you create different contacts. But once you get a head start, it feels like the ball keeps rolling and rolling and rolling, and then you just got to take every opportunity when you're there.
It's just getting over that first hurdle, that first initial hurdle.
Absolutely, yeah, getting over that first initial bit. But you can't. We did it without an agent the first time round, and the second time round we did it with an agent, and it was so much better. Definitely not saying don't get an agent, but if you don't have money to spend on an agent, if you're a new upcoming artist or band, make friends with people who run stages.
Yeah, that can go for festivals. So there is a kind of festival circuit now that didn't really exist even a decade ago. And if you've got a show that will work at festivals, then sometimes if you've got one gig at a festival, you can maybe get 4 gigs at that festival, particularly if it's something like Glastonbury. If you've got one show at Glastonbury, there are so many other stages and slots just available when you get there, you can go around and get more gigs. And the people who organise, particularly at, say, somewhere like Glastonbury, all the people organising all the stages are promoters from around the country and the Southwest in particular. So, the people who organise the dance stages are organising dance-based events across the Southeast, and the people involved with the Avalon stage and other stages. So they're all promoters. So that's a way to kind of get seen and get offered stuff. And then other bands I've seen recently are basically, they've become friendly with another band that's getting a tour, or that band just likes them and can see that they're going to work as an opener for them, so they get invited. But the thing is to be able to say yes to that, because it's a lot of time travelling around, a lot of waiting around, doing nothing, you spending a lot of time not doing anything and not earning any money for a small amount of time when you are being productive. And then, but the other side of it is there is funding available to support bands to build a touring program. So you can apply to the Arts Council, you can apply to help musicians, you can apply to PRS Foundation to put some money in so that you can afford to take time off your day job and go and do a tour, or pay your drummer to come with you, unless your drummer's doing it for nothing, or pay for a van or whatever it needs to be, so that you can say yes to those gigs that pay 50 quid that aren't covering your costs, but you've got something to fall back on that will fund that.
So we mentioned the agent, but how many people does it realistically take to make a tour successful? Could you do it as just the artist, or do you need roadies, etc.?
I think you can do it just as the artist if you're happy to drive. I think maybe the first person you'd want to get on board is a sound engineer, because if you can show your sound off to the best, then you're winning. You're not just relying on someone, maybe some deaf local guy who's not interested in what you're doing. So maybe that'd be the first person to employ, would be a sound engineer. But you can do it. Yeah, do it yourself. Do it in a car.
It kind of depends on where you're going. So essentially, once you go anywhere out of the UK, it then becomes really complicated, and you really need a professional person involved in that. I mean, we with the band we did some shows in Brazil, and it was only when it was all prepared and all planned, and at the time running up to going to the airport to go to the gig, I was beginning to think, I thought you're supposed to have a visa to go to Brazil. I thought, literally we're at the airport and it's like, okay, so we've got no visas. We're all tourists, all right, with our guitar. Yeah, and I'm with like 8 Indian guys with massive drums. And it's like, yeah, we're all on a tourist, we're all visiting. So it's like, send one through, wait. Then the next one. So yeah, that stuff. And that's because somebody just didn't have the time and the knowledge to plan that. And you can get into some trouble. People get banned from the United States for doing things like that. It can be problematic.
I think also when you're touring, and if you're going to do it on your own, make sure that you've got your kit. So you've got your in-ears, everybody knows how to use it. So you can't turn around and say, especially if you've got a band that's more than 5 people, you want to hear each other. And you can't turn around and go, oh, I couldn't hear the drums, or And I think that's really important, just making sure that you are kitted out with what you need so that you can go on stage and you have your, so if there's a sound engineer that's there, if you don't have your own sound engineer, you have your spec that's written out and you're organized. With touring, you have to be organized, and notoriously musicians are not very organized. Get on stage, play a really good show, but behind the scenes, if there's an email that says, what's your spec? It's like, nobody knows what the band's spec is. And really, everybody should know what the drummer needs, what the guitarist needs. Everybody needs to know that. Even if you're the singer, and I'm the singer, and people take the mick because they go, oh, you just turn up with a microphone. And actually, no, I got to carry the drums. I got to know what the bass is doing. You have to be a total musician. So if you want to go on your own, you need to be able to be the boss and tell people what you want.
And if you're not a star, nobody cares about anything that you're bothered about. We've been in bands that are like the main band playing at a festival in a huge square in the middle of Turin in Italy, and we get there and they're supposed to provide a drum kit, and you get the drum kit and it's like the cymbals are bent backwards and the snare's got a hole in it, and we're supposed to, it's like, we can't play that. Well, that's what we got, and they haven't built the stage, and everything that's going to go wrong has already gone wrong, and there's more to go wrong on that day, and you've just got to get through it. So you have to be, quite a lot of the time you spend being quite assertive with people to get the very basic requirements that you need in order to just function. And they'll do things like go, well, you can only have 5. I was in a band, there was 12 of us in the band, and they go, well, you can 5 if you can come. Well, that doesn't work. That's not the band. You haven't booked the band. You've booked 5 random people. So sometimes you have quite weird conversations about just the basic logistics of doing the thing that you're being asked to do.
And Jack, we were talking before the panel about you switching your setup to sort of like having a click and stuff like that. Is that something you found essential in your stage show now?
No, so we were basically talking earlier about, so we played for years without a click, hate the click. And because we're trying to like up production, the sensible thing is to do with a click to make the visuals and stuff. And it takes away that element of playing solely live, doesn't it? Because you can't go out of the click. And it's like, do I sell my soul and go big with production, or no? I find it, those things you were mentioning there, like when it comes to traveling, playing shows, actually playing's the easy part. It's all the little details you mentioned. Like anywhere outside the United Kingdom, we send a list of what we need. We get there and there's 8 things and 7 of them are wrong. And you go, oh no. It's those things, and the liability insurance and the PRS documents, and so going back to could you do it on your own?
Which power socket you need?
100%. You said about being prepared. Like we played a show a few years ago. It was in, I think it was like South America. It's a long, long way away. Took 2 guitars, showed up, 1 wasn't there. And you go, wow, if I'd have took 1, I would be somewhere. Don't have a clue what I'm doing with no guitar. So going back to could you do it on your own? I think probably small, intimate venues possibly, but anything bigger, you certainly need help. And I'd always say take someone with you, because they can pay for the McDonald's on the way home. That's yeah, man.
And make sure you've got the best, heaviest, hardest flight case you can get for your guitar, because it doesn't matter how strong it is, it's going to have a hole in it and be bent and be broken when you next see it.
We've sort of touched on visas and stuff, but what is something about touring that people forget? If there's one thing like this is essential, but you wouldn't think about it if you weren't touring, what would you say that is?
Plug adapters.
Plug adapters.
Well, I always used to make sure the band, especially band members, because they're a bit flighty, but make sure if you're going, wherever you go, just take your passport and a credit card with you, and then you can get out of trouble not without too much difficulty. But another thing is, if you're doing loads of dates and you're in a hotel, after 5 or 6, you just forget where you are. So like try and get a card for the hotel, or something. So once you've walked off 2 miles, you've got someone
Get home.
somewhere to say, it's a hotel.
You were pre-mobile phone map.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've toured in those days and got off a bus and walked off and then not even know what country I was in.
If you're touring festivals, find out how many car passes you're being allotted. Because you turn up to a festival with 5 cars and they go, oh, you're only allowed 3 cars. And you go, okay. And make sure if you're driving a tour van, if you don't have a van driver, that at least 2 of you are licensed to drive that van. Because I had to drive from Ireland all the way back here by myself with 6 of them in the back and nobody else to drive. And it was not fun.
And make sure that the van itself has road tax so that it doesn't get impounded by the police
And also-
as you arrive at Glastonbury Festival.
And
then-
also that you have the AA covered because we busted a tyre and couldn't get it fixed. And it was bank holiday and we missed our ferry back from Ireland. So we had to wait a whole day. And there was no shops open because it was bank holiday. And it was the worst day of my life. So definitely make sure you're covered if you've got a van.
I think that the tour manager role is key once you have maybe more than 2 people involved in the exercise, because you can guarantee that somebody's not going to be where they're supposed to be. Because they're musicians. They're all the musicians. I mean, anybody's even tried to organise a band practice. Imagine having to do band practice every day in a different place. That's what essentially you're doing. And there's always going to be somebody. It's knowing who you have to tell to be there an hour earlier than everybody else so that they still arrive an hour later than everybody else. Who's not going to show up at all. Who's going to have forgotten their instrument.
Who's going to forget where they camped?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is something I've always wanted to know. Is touring like it is portrayed in the movies? Is it anything
Depends
like
on which movies you're watching.
I don't know. But is it glamorous? Is it anything at all like it?
It's really fun when you turn up and you've got a rider and they give you everything you've asked for on the rider. That's quite fun. But apart from that, I mean, we even tried the whole, take out all the blue Skittles, but that didn't quite happen.
We had a rider in Holland last year, genuinely got backstage and there was like a box full of crisps and peanuts and toilet roll and a massive box of condoms. It's like, well, what are we going to do?
I mean, you're in Holland, so...
Yeah.
You discover that there's only so many cheese and ham sandwiches you could eat in Europe, because that's everywhere it's just cheese and ham.
And also when you're on a tour bus and there's loads of you, at some point, someone needs to go to the bathroom. So you're stopping at every service station and making sure that everybody gets off, goes to the bathroom, and then doesn't bother you for another, 3 hours while you're trying to get to the next location. So I think it's definitely not as glamorous. However, I would say it's a lot of fun because as a band, you spend a lot of time together. So you have your in-jokes and, you say silly things and you get used to each other. It's fun. It's really fun as a band. And when you get off stage, you're still on a high and you meet people and you spend loads of time together. And I think it's not glamorous for sure, but it's a lot of fun, especially if you're young and you have a group of band people that you just want to spend loads of time with, then for sure. And if you're a solo artist, bring people along who are responsible, but also people you can have a laugh with. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I can't remember. I think I was watching a Dave Grohl thing or reading a Dave Grohl thing, and he was saying, in terms of the people in the band, it's all about the hang. And it is people that you can basically talk shit to for days on end and not be sick of, or that you're happy to play the same game of poker for a week and lose money, then get it back and then lose it again, and nobody's going to be difficult about it.
And you write music on tour as well. I found that. We wrote loads of music on tour. Because you're listening to other people while you're on tour and you're getting inspiration and you go, oh, I really like, let's write something that sounds a bit like that. And then you end up with a whole 3-4 new songs, which I found that I never expected while being on tour. That was good.
I ended up watching an inordinate amount of drum tuition videos on tour buses by, weirdo jazz drummers, because somebody's like, you really need to watch this Dave Weckl video. No, that's very dull.
No limousines and private jets then.
No.
Oh yeah, been limited. No private jet. No, I've even been on a private jet. Thinking about it, but there was like 50 of us in a private jet. It wasn't quite that. Some nice limos, a limo bus. Yeah, don't drink all the alcohol in the limo before the gig.
So this is the fun bit, which you sort of touched on there, Gavin. Have you got any favourite stories / memories?
Back in 2018, we were playing for Germany 2 weeks, and I took a guy with me who, looking back, probably shouldn't have done because he was just nuts. And I'd always stayed in hotel rooms and just slept. And he was like, "No, we're going out." And we wanted to see Brandenburg Gate. That was it, wanted to go to Brandenburg Gate. And I was like, "No, we don't know where we're going. Let's stay where we can." He's like, "No, Brandenburg Gate, here's a ticket." Got on a train, and we were in Berlin, so it shouldn't have been that far. I was on a train for 3 hours. Like, mate, where are we going? Like, we're going to Brandenburg Gate. We went to Brandenburg, which is 3 hours outside of Berlin, and just pulled up to a field. Like, cool. So, yeah, that's...
I think a lot of my memories are disasters. So the first Glastonbury Radiohead played at in '97 was was the first really wet year. Couldn't get any vehicles down to the stage. And at the end of the gig, we were supposed to be transported back up the hill in a Land Rover. As soon as the last band finishes at Glastonbury, all the local crew just go off and go up to Shangri-La and spend the night off their heads. We had no transport back. We just stood in the mud, just headlined the main stage. 2 hours, just waiting for a Land Rover to come and get us. No one's bothered. So that's kind of the main memory of the night, which is unfortunate because it's an amazing gig.
There's quite a lot of weird ones. Going all the way to New Zealand to do a gig in a place called Dunedin, and then spotting a bus to Caversham and going, oh, just going to get on that bus. And went to Caversham in New Zealand. And it was a beach, and ran into the beach, into the sea, and then went, oh, that's the Antarctic Ocean. It was really cold. So that was a fun experience. And then one of the ones that was kind of the sort of mundane side of it and the surreal side of it was, doing my day job, finishing my day job, to then go on a tour the next morning. And at that point, I was working in London, and going, we'll just go have a couple of drinks before I get the train back to Reading, to then get the bus to Heathrow, and then had a few too many drinks, fell asleep on the train, woke up in Swindon.
Oh, that's the worst place to wake up in, isn't it?
At like 1 a.m, and I had to be at Heathrow at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m, and then had to get a cab to Reading, and then another cab to the bus, and then to Heathrow. And then we got there, and it was like, yeah, we made it. We all went for another drink, and then totally forgot to get on the plane. And we were that, the annoying people that hold the plane back, and the whole band kind of trooped through. Yeah, that was the most embarrassing flight. Yeah.
I think probably sharing dressing rooms with bands that you think, how am I sharing a dressing room with this band? Yeah. So one of the festivals we did was a jazz festival, and we shared a dressing room with the Jacksons, which was nuts. And then the other one was Bob Marley and the Wailers. Obviously, it wasn't Bob Marley, but it was...
Yeah, that would have been even more shocking.
I know, right? And so, but touring is interesting because backstage, I got massive imposter syndrome, because I just think, what you see someone like Damon Albarn from Blur, and he walked past it in the Gorillas, and I'm going, ah! And my band member tapped me on the shoulder and went, you know that there's a reason why you're here. And you have this thing because you don't realize that everybody's backstage. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're backstage, you're backstage. So I think one of the best things about being on tour is being surprised by the people you meet and how nice they are or how not nice they are. They say never meet your heroes, but I met a few and they were all amazing. So best thing about touring, I found, or the stories were when you least expect to meet people.
Yeah, there was one festival where we were in a dressing room and then we just had to go, it's like little porta cabins, then you had to go and wait for somebody to take you to the stage. And we got out of our dressing room and the band opposite got out of theirs to get to the little get on your golf trolley thing. And it was the Beastie Boys. And I was like, it's the Beastie Boys.
Yeah, you love the Beastie Boys.
I couldn't talk. you know. So yeah, that was a moment. But also when you're with the band and they haven't got a clue who those people are, and they're like, "It's the Beastie Boys." And
Well, this has been fun. Thanks, everyone. Just before we wrap up, has anyone got anything to add or anything you want to promote or anything?
Never quit a tour halfway. See it all the way through. I didn't. That's not speaking.
Did you quit halfway?
No, one of our band members quit 2 gigs towards the end, and the poor guitarist had to learn all the keyboard parts. He'd smashed it though.
I would have been fuming.
Absolutely smashed it. And then in the middle, if I needed to fill in with vocals, I would like, pretend I was a keyboard. Not very well, but don't, because it can be really frustrating if it's your first time doing it. It's a lot of work, but don't quit. Just see it to the end.
And if you're going to improvise something, have a think about it. We were on tour the day Michael Jackson died, and the front man turned around and went, said some words, and then he just turned to the band and said, "Play Michael Jackson."
Well, like James Brown.
play Michael Jackson, So I go into Smooth Criminal, the bass player's playing Beat It, somebody else is playing Billie Jean. It wasn't good.
Yes. But thank you. This is my favourite part to do. Is any audience members got any questions?
This is for Jack. So you're still currently touring. I was wondering how coronavirus affected you.
I was mentioning to someone out there earlier that I had a daughter in 2019 in September. COVID hit, was it 2020? Yeah. 2020, like beginning of 2020. And we were in Austria when it happened. It's like, shit, just get home. And got home, and I spent 2 years at home with my daughter. So I done 5 years of gigging, 2 years of being a dad, and now I'm back. Sort of 50-50. It was a weird one. What it made me realise was that, like any person you take it for granted, you're like, I hate my job because it's late nights and I don't get home and stuff. And then you don't do it for 2 years. And you go, actually, I really miss that. So now I'm going to go and take advantage of it and not take it for granted. That's me, anyway, like personally. But yeah, it was cool to also be at home and reflect, I guess, I think. I don't know about you guys, but I quite enjoyed that.
Did it also, has it affected it since?
So I think it's affected people going out and being a bit more vigilant. I think that's probably factual. But personally, we struggle more with Brexit than COVID. Like trying to work abroad has been harder than any form of COVID. What has been difficult is the different rules in different countries, like with COVID and vaccinations and all those kind of things. But I think we're getting there.
Any other questions? No. Well,
we're happy to answer anything that you might even think's a stupid question. Don't worry.
We will also be about. So we've got Ray Wills playing in a minute. Yeah. Well, in a minute we'll let people get some drinks and for him to set up. So yeah, we'll have Ray Wills playing. But thank you. I'd also like to thank the Biscuit Factory for letting us do this every other month. Thanks for the panelists for coming on. This has been a really good conversation. So thank you. And this will also be available as a podcast on the Music Changing Lives podcast that Readipop do. So thank you, everyone.
And thank you, Harrison, for being such an amazing host.
It's all right. Thank you.